Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Steve. And this is the
Electroencephalagraphahat. Fool. The brain is split up into 4 different lobes. Each lobe is believed to perform a specific function. The frontal lobe takes care of logic and emotions. The parietal lobe takes care of movement and spatial orientation. The temporal lobe governs speech, pattern recognition, audio recognition, and the occipital lobe processes information taken from the retinas of the eyes. So visual. Or so they say. We've decided to test this claim using the knowledge that when a group of neurons fire in the brain, charges are built up on the outside of the scalp. These charges can then be measured using the appropriate circuit.
So what we've done is we've fixed these electrodes into the hat in the spots where we know that the 4 lobes of the brain are supposed to be. And then what happens is these electrodes serve as the antennas into the gate of these field effect transistors. And so what happens is when charge builds up on the electrodes, the amount of current coming through the field effect transistors is going to change. And the changing current through the field effect transistors is going to cause the voltage drop across these resistors right here, which are wired in series across the drain, to change. And what we do is we monitor the voltage drop across the resistor with the Arduino.
Here's a schematic of the whole circuit, where this wire goes to the electrodes in the hat, which then build up charge based on brain activity. The changing charge causes the field effect transistor to allow more charge carriers to flow, resulting in the voltage drop across this resistor to change. This wire then monitors the voltage drop across the resistor.
The voltage drop across the resistor is then read by the Arduino, which stores it onto the SD card for later retrieval. So in actually carrying out our experiments, we found that there was a lot of just background static charge that would always saturate our field effect transistors. So to solve this problem, we put a Faraday cage over it to just isolate the electric field around it. In addition to stray, just background static charges, we also found that our electrodes were measuring static charge not only from their brain lobe that they were attached to, but also from adjacent brain lobes. So to solve that problem, we actually installed little miniature Faraday cages around each electrode individually.
So to show that our circuit is actually working the way we expect it to, we generate static electricity through this high-tech means, as you can see. And as I bring the rod closer, you can see the numbers go way down, which implies that it is reading. And when I take the bar away, they go back up as expected. And you can see how very sensitive that our sensor is, because I only have to come up to here and they all go to 0. Like so. And that's 2 feet away.
Pretty impressive.
This is Steve using his frontal lobe. This is Steve using his parietal lobe. Shh. Do it. Yeah. This is Steve using his occipital lobe. This is Steve using his temporal lobe.
So when running tests with the EEG hat on, without the aluminum foil Faraday cage, these are what our raw results for balancing on one foot and staring at a multicolored umbrella as it spun around looked like. As you can see, the data spikes a lot, and these spikes do not in any way correlate to our actions, meaning they must have come from background static and not brain activity. After installing the aluminum Faraday cage over the hat, our results look slightly better. Here's a run done where I worked on the quantum work for a little bit. The data still has some spikes, however not nearly as many as before in a much longer period of time, meaning that not as much static noise was getting onto the electrodes. However, this data still is not very useful, and worse yet is the fact that no lobe really ever seems to be working harder than the others. This graph is a running average minus the actual data points, and it shows that the fluctuations of static charge occurred at the same time for most of the lobes, suggesting that this data also did not correlate to any individual lobe activity. It was only after putting Faraday cages around each individual electrode, and then performing an activity that was most likely to only stimulate one lobe, that we were actually able to get a result that suggests that specific lobes of the brain do respond to specific activities. With the hat on and Faraday cages in place, Lisa listened to music in a quiet setting with her eyes closed. This means that the only lobe of the brain that should have anything to process should have been her temporal lobe, responsible for pattern recognition and audio processing, both present in music. Sure enough, after several minutes, the reading from the temporal lobe begins to drop as we expect, while the others remain fairly constant. Not only that, but you can see from this graph of running averages minus actual data points, that the data we were getting was fairly stable, meaning there were not huge fluctuations from outside sources interfering with our results. The only lobe showing spikes is the temporal lobe when we began to get our readings, meaning that the charge in the lobe was actually doing something with respect to the others all by itself. So, after wearing the hat for many hours and grinding through the pain of electrodes daggering our scalps, we finally were able to isolate a single brain lobe's activity, thus suggesting that specific tasks are actually tied to certain lobes of the brain.
In doing this experiment, we learned a number of things, but one of the main things I learned was that there's a different kind of transistor called a field effect transistor, and it behaves differently from a normal PNP transistor in that it allows charge carriers to flow based on charge building up on the gate, or the antenna in our case.
Something I learned that I wasn't really aware of before was just how sensitive these can be, and due to their high sensitivity, we were required to isolate them from each other as well as the outside environment, and that was pretty intense. We're awesome.
Yep.